Welcome to the Power Lunch live on LinkedIn. This is Rhett Power. I'm Rhett Power, your host. We do this program Monday through Friday, typically around 12 noon, if the technology gods let us get the show on the air at the right time. Now, the point of the show is to talk to today's thought leaders, people who are doing amazing work in the world, CEOs, best-selling authors, corporate leaders. And we talk to them about their secrets to success, the habits that they have that help them be successful. And we want to learn from them. And that's the whole point of the show, is to learn from our guests. Now, the fun part about this is that the show is interactive. And the only way that can happen is if you get involved and you ask your questions. You can do that on social media via LinkedIn, and then we can interact with you and answer those questions. So please do ask your questions. That's one of the reasons why we do this. Now, the fun part of the show is that it's simulcast on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn all at the same time. And that's with the help of Social Live. If you like the program, give it a like or share so that your network can benefit from these conversations. Now, my promise to you is to bring you the very best. Today, I think I've done that. I've got Jason Harris. He's the CEO and co-founder of the creative agency Mechanism. He has won numerous awards, got a book right now that's number 3 on the Wall Street Journal list. Now, he's one of the things I liked, he's one of the top social impact leaders in the world, number 5 on that list. He's worked with iconic brands such as HBO, Amazon, the United Nations. My favorite, Ben & Jerry's, and Peloton. Ben & Jerry's, very good. His new book, The Soulful Art of Persuasion by Penguin Random House, is described as a self-help book to help readers become master influencers. Jason, welcome to the show. And he brought props, which I really, really love.
Thanks for having me. You can never push the book too hard.
There you go. Well, thanks for. It's been a busy launch couple of weeks after post-launch, and so I know your time is valuable. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure as ours. I wanted to sort of dig into the book because I think there's so much to learn from it, so many takeaways that I got. So for you, what do you think what were your biggest takeaways? I mean, I wanted to ask you about the 11 character building habits. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how you talk about how persuasion is not based on logic and facts. It's based on character. Go for it. Let's chat about that.
Yeah, sure. So the cool idea behind the book was I've been in advertising for 22 years, and you're always pitching, and you're selling to clients for you to buy your idea, and then you have to launch your idea out into the world and get consumers to buy your product or service. And so if we take those lessons and sort of persuasion and selling and pitching and at the highest sort of level under the microscope, but I could extrapolate those lessons of what I've learned through successes and failures, I wanted to create a broad book that anyone could benefit from, because every day we're persuading in every instance. You know, you're persuading, maybe your spouse is persuading you to move to Brazil, or you're persuading your kids to get ready for school or apply to college, or you're persuading your boss to give you a raise, or you're persuading someone to come on your show. There's instances all day long where we're trying to get people to agree with us. And so, running a successful business, I just wanted to figure out what habits that I've learned that are successful or not, and I put them into a book and compiled them into 11 habits. And those habits are all about character, and what persuades people isn't logic and facts and arguments. It's about who's doing the talking. Where is it coming from? Are you building trust? Are you building relationships? And that's what leads to success. So I put those down. And some of these characteristics I'm naturally good at. You might be naturally good at other ones, but anything can be learned through repetition and practice, then they can become natural habits, which I talk about how to do that in the book.
Yeah, what are some of the most important of the 11? What are some of the most important habits you think?
So
I mean, they're all important, obviously, but which ones stand out to you?
Yeah, so one that I talk about a lot is never be closing. And that's the idea of playing the long game and not looking at things in terms of short-term transactional sales. So if you're playing the long game, you're always thinking about building relationships and what's best for the other person, not how it can benefit you, how you can get the deal signed and closed, but how over time those relationships pay off. And it's counterintuitive to what you think of in traditional sales of ABC, like Glengarry Ross, which is always be closing, always get the signature on the dotted line. That's short-term thinking, and that might make for a couple good quarters of growth, but ultimately, when you're just trying to push your agenda and let your relationships drop, people know that you're looking out for your state. So that's one example.
Okay.
Another one I talk about is the persuasive power of storytelling, and the idea that the mind is a story processor, not a logic processor, and the way that we retain information is through storytelling, and persuasion is based on storytelling. It's not facts and data and numbers. So that's another one. Let's see what else. So there's that. There's
we're getting a little
the idea of the collaboration. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you, but your sound is a little bit dragging a little bit, and I want to know is there an Ethernet? Can we do this on Ether? Is there an Ethernet cord? And maybe it might speed it up a little bit, because I feel like we're dragging a little bit on our sound, and so I don't know if that's coming through to the audience, but
okay, let me get that.
But you were go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's sort of like two channels. I hear myself twice. I don't know if that's. Let me grab. Hang on one second. We're doing this live. So it is dragging, and it's like see, but there's latency. I don't know. Oh, really? All right. Almost there. This is good for a live show. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, one day this will get a lot easier.
Yeah. All right, so that's good. Yes, just take a few seconds. Is there anything you have to set up on? All I will have to do, make sure that it is actually seen. Yes, I'm going to turn Wi-Fi off.
Tim Sohn from the Woods in PA, thanks for joining us while we get our sound squared away. So while we're getting sound, let us know where you're listening from if you want to chime in, or just say hi. I think we lost Jason for a second. Hopefully we'll get him back here in just a minute. You there? All right. Let's see if we can. How about that?
Yeah, there we go. It's much better. There's no latency now.
Yes, that's great.
All right. Thanks, great, Jonathan. Sorry about that on the live podcast. Sorry about everyone watching.
Hey, no worries, man. Sometimes it's good to stop for a second, get it going right. So we got John coming in. Thanks, John, for joining us. Nicole from Tampa. Thanks, Nicole. So let's go back to what we were talking about, and you were talking about the 11 habits that you talk about in the book, and I think those are fascinating because I've always thought that persuasion was about. I didn't really put character in the equation, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So it's a lot of times it's not what you're saying, it's the person that's saying it, right? So I always liken it to when you watch the presidential debates and the beer test, which is really known in politics as how we determine who we're going to elect. A lot of it is you might not know policy and you might not understand the nuances of Medicare, but when you see someone's character, you instinctively have a feeling if you can trust them or not. And if they're persuasive to you, if you believe what they're saying, or if they're disingenuous and coming off as a politician. And so that's just like a very good example of how we elect and how we listen to our gut, because subconsciously it's about trust and do we believe in this person, and that comes from character, not from necessarily like the facts and data and numbers and who has the best plan. It's really about the personality and the character.
Yeah, we judge people instantly, don't we? Just naturally.
We do. We also have incredibly good bullshit detectors. We know subconsciously, right off the bat, if somebody is trustworthy or if they're trying to pull a fast one on us. And a lot of the old adages, like a lot of the old sales techniques and books today in an age of distrust, they don't work. So, saying the person's name 10 times, when you hear that, oh, this person has been like trained in this technique to try to win me over.
Right.
Or, patting you on the back, being sort of overly complimentary.
Right.
Those things are tried and true sales techniques that today in an age of distrust just don't work.
And they come across as fake and sort of,
smarmy.
Smarmy. That's a great word. I love that word. So what are the sort of keys to negotiation today? I mean, you talk about the four of them in your book.
Yeah, so there's the 11 habits come out of 4 principles, and the first one, which is hard to do, but it's this idea of being original and being yourself and leaning into your quirks. And it goes back to the Oscar Wilde quote of, be yourself, everyone else is already taken. And it's this idea of we're often taught in business and in negotiations to mirror the other person, or if that person likes golf, for you to tell a story about golf or fishing or an interest that you might align with them on. But really what builds trust and helps close deals is opening up to someone showing a little psychic skin about who you are, what motivates you, who your role models are, what your quirks and interests truly are, and being open about it and honest and not trying to parrot the other person. So being original is one of the big principles. The second one is this idea of generosity, which for me is a skill that I really had to learn. It doesn't come natural to me. I'm naturally a kind person, but I'm not naturally a generous person.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of generosity is always giving without expecting anything in return. And when you do that, things will pay off in compound interest, and you don't know how or when, but trust that it will. And generosity can be generous with connections. Someone needs someone, you connect them. It can be generous with advice, generous with time, generous with counsel, generous with, it could even be gifts. It could be buying someone a book, sending them a note of an article that you read that you think would relate to them, letting people know that they're on your mind. So being generous as a way of looking at the world. And then the third principle, so there's original, generous, empathy, which is really about putting yourself in the other person's shoes and learning how to collaborate and not creating an us versus them mentality.
Right.
The idea is we're all made up of 99.9% of the same DNA. There's 1.1% that is different in all of us.
Right.
So if you come at it from that standpoint, that we all want the same things, we all share the same values, we all have the same needs and desires in life, versus I think about it this way, this person thinks about it this way, and we're like this. You look at it as, why does that person feel that way? How do I understand where they're coming from, what their motives are, what they're looking for? Because we're all, unless you're some kind of psychotic killer, we're all like the same. We're just in different skins, but we're all the same sort of at the heart of it. And then the final one is this idea of soulfulness, which is learning your skills and matching your skills with some kind of purpose that does something good for the world. And combining those principles will lead to personal growth and business success that I found work for me in my life.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and that I particularly like the soulfulness. I think that's one of those missing elements that we often we don't connect those two, right? And I think we'd be a lot happier if we did. What when I was reading your book, one of the things I found fascinating was the Ben Franklin effect, and this whole idea of sort of asking for favors first.
Yeah.
Sort of counterintuitive to me. Before you provide value, like we're taught, we hear all this, be of value, provide value before you ask for a favor or for help or something. And so what did you? There's some interesting research about it too, I think.
Yeah. So the story. Ben Franklin, of course, such a pioneer in so many things, but when he was a lawmaker in Philadelphia, he never graduated high school. He came from a poor family, but he was just naturally gifted speaker and really smart. And there was a lawmaker in Philadelphia that really had it out for him because he was rich, well-educated, didn't think Ben Franklin sort of fit into the idea of politics at the time. And Ben Franklin, he would always sort of challenge Ben Franklin. He would create sort of gossip circles about him and was really out to get him. And Ben Franklin, being the sort of ninja master, he asked this lawmaker for a particular book that he knew he had in his vast library, that this other lawmaker had in his library. And by asking for that book, he wasn't doing anything of value for his antagonist. He was just knew he had this book, asked for it, and he created this bond because Ben Franklin knew that this this lawmaker had a book and complimented him on his book collection, asked to borrow other books after that, and they became lifelong friends. And so that became known as the Ben Franklin effect, which is when you ask for small favors, you create a bond with someone who could be antagonistic or could be seen as your enemy, but you create a bond when you ask for something, they're more apt to do favors for you in the future. And it's similar, like if you think of when you're at the airport and you're like, hey, could you watch my luggage? Or I have to run to the restroom or whatever it might be. You turn that sort of stranger into an ally with a simple act like that, asking for small favors. So I'm always thinking at work or with a client, you don't think necessarily your first instinct isn't to ask for something, but when you do, it builds bridges and alliances, and that's what's known as the Ben Franklin effect.
You're absolutely right. Like I a couple of weeks ago, I was flying somewhere, and I asked the lady, and this couple actually next to me, and before I asked them to watch my bag, I think we'd been sitting there in silence for 30 minutes, right? When I came back, we struck up a conversation, and
amazing.
And it wasn't, and I didn't think about that in that context, but that is absolutely right. It opened up a door to a conversation, and they willingly engaged in that conversation afterwards.
Yeah, it creates a bond, and you can instantly make friends that way by asking for favors, and it's counterintuitive because you think that they should be asking you for a favor, but you flip it on its head. It works really well.
I like that.
Yeah, that's fun.
That's a great lesson. I mean, that's just a great lesson for all of us in terms of, social media. I mean, do you see that applicable in social media in any way, or?
Yeah, definitely. Of course. I mean, when you have something to promote or you need help with something, it's amazing how people will rally around you when your initial reaction is to be scared to do so because you think you're putting someone out or asking too much or didn't offer something up in return. But that's a good one. Another lesson that I really had to learn, which is very useful, is this idea of never let relationships drop to zero. Mm-hmm. And that's really when you meet it. For me, when I pitch a client and we don't win the pitch, or I meet a friend in the industry, it's so easy to sort of get those business cards or that contact and then never follow up and let it drop off your radar. And I make it a point, and I use a lot of calendaring and effective tools like that to always reach out and keep those relationships alive sort of once a quarter. So like if I met you today, we did this show, instead of not contacting you again, I'm going to stay in touch with you and build upon that relationship because it's so easy to just lose touch. Right. So the idea of never letting relationships drop to zero is really fundamental in business for success and personally, because if you let those relationships die, the next time I would contact you is, let's say I have another book coming out. Right. I haven't contacted you in 2 years. And I'm like, hey, Rhett, I got a new book coming out. Can you help me promote it? And it just comes across as being self-absorbed. But if we build this relationship, you're like, you ask me for another guest, I refer people to you, I help in any way. We build a connection and a relationship over time that's much more than just simple transaction. And so I always try to practice that idea of sort of once a quarter, staying in touch. If I see something of interest that might be good for Power Lunch, I'll email you a link. Mm-hmm. And that's just smart business, and it builds friendships as well.
Well, and it leads to, from a friendship standpoint is wonderful. And a business standpoint, it leads to business. I'm going to refer people to you. I'm going to,
exactly.
If I have a book out now, I know I can come to you, right? And hey, can you send this out on your email list, or it starts a back and forth. I like the idea of you. So you say you put that on like a calendar?
So I have almost 5 days a week. I don't do it on the weekends. I'll have little slots of 4 people a day that I haven't talked to that I'll make a note to send them a text message, send them a book that I would recommend for them. Maybe they're in the retail sector and I read an article that might be applied to their industry, or it could just be a friend from college or someone that I haven't talked to in a while. Just let them know that I'm thinking about them, and it just keeps that relationship alive. That's one of the greatest tools of the digital age and text messaging and social media and, DMing people, just letting them know that you're thinking about them and their interests, and it's just like a friendly hey, and that just keeps relationships alive. And a lot of times things that you would just broadcast to everyone, all your followers on social, maybe, take a story and save it for someone that loves entertainment or movies or AR or whatever, and send them that link directly. Send it to a couple of your friends. And it's that personal touch that matters. Just because you're broadcasting something to your tens of thousands of followers, that's not helping build a relationship,
You talk about sort of developing persuasive character is to unapologetically be yourself.
Yeah.
And I think we started talking about that earlier about being yourself, but I think we were having some sound stuff issues. Talk about that a little bit. Because I think we have a hard time being ourselves. I think we're conditioned to be someone else at work and someone else at home, someone else with our friends. And I just think sometimes we have a really hard time being our authentic self.
Yeah. So one way that this idea of being an original, and really the foundation starts from understanding before you can have other people understand you, you have to understand yourself. Before you can be a persuasive person, you need to persuade yourself into what your values are, what your ideals are, who your role models are, what your passions are, what your interests are. Really study those, become expert at a few things that you love. I mean, I'm a big David Bowie fan, and any chance I get, I'll tell people, I'll share David Bowie wisdom with them. I'll buy every David Bowie book under the sun.
Right.
Having those roles, that's like something that I'm really into. And instead of looking at simply mirroring the other person, it's really understanding the things that you care about and the quirks and what makes you unique, and trying to show up with those values and that personality holistically, not compartmentalizing your life into this is my work self, this is my home life self, this is the way I am with my friends, but really trying to think about it as you're always yourself, and you're always uniquely yourself in all instances. It doesn't mean you're throwing F-bombs around the office, or you're making crass jokes, because that's what you might do with your friends. I'm not saying be reckless, but really try to holistically think about who you are and what makes you you, and instead of hiding away your quirks and your likes, trying to lean into them and broadcast them and let people know about them. I think that leads to more success.
How does all that translate to brands? I mean, you probably have several examples, but I think, because I think the consumers today are sort of demanding that same authenticity from brands and companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, how as a brand, how do you do that?
So I think as a brand, when we work with different brands, we try to really dig into the core truth behind that brand. Why that brand started? What was the purpose behind it? What does it stand for that's bigger than just profits and sales data and numbers and quarterly earnings? What is that brand? If that brand was a human being or a person, what values would that brand have? What would the personality be for that brand? And then try to embody that. And that really happened because of the advent of social media, where human consumers could talk to the brand, and the brand had to talk back. And by creating that dialogue, which is no surprise, obviously everyone knows about that, but by creating that dialogue, brands had to develop that personality because they're on platforms made for humans talking to humans. And so they have to create these human characteristics. They have to have guidelines and rules about who they are and what their point of view is and what they stand for. And like humans, I think sometimes brands today will just jump on the latest cause. You know, everyone's talking about climate now.
Right.
Or they might be talking about LGBTQ rights or whatever the latest issue might be. That doesn't mean you have to believe in all those things and try to jump on trends. It means, what does this brand care about? What are the values? What are the 2 or 3 purpose-driven things that this brand cares about? And stick to those. You know, don't go chasing everything to try to join every conversation. It really comes down to the reason for the product or service, why it was believed, what truth was it born out of? Because everything was created either by an entrepreneur, a founder, a group of leaders, but every brand was created to solve a problem or create a purpose or put something out into the world. So going back to that reason for existing, and then what are the human characteristics and belief systems around that? And so we do a lot of that type of exercising strategically with our clients.
Is that something that let's say a small, mom and pop or a regional store chain or whatever, is that something they can do too? I mean, how do you apply that? Let's say you're in a non-sexy business, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you differentiate yourself? How do you, is it by being involved in something local? Is it, it seems like it's not probably taking on a national or international issue. It's probably taking on something locally, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think any business can apply that principle, and I think it's critical. Like, I think, as you said, consumers demand it now, but it could be as simple as, like, an example that I like is, Shinola, they make watches.
Yeah.
So that's a bigger company, but when they started small, they started in Detroit, and everything they have says, made in Detroit. They really came from, not that these watches are going to change the world, but they really came from an idea of community, and that Shinola stands for the Detroit Renaissance, and we care about creating jobs, and that we're going to proudly say we're built in Detroit, and that's what we care about. Another company could care about the way they make the product is they want to save half of the water they would normally use to make this jeans product. They're going to, care for the environment in another way. Another small mom and pop company could be about community, or it could be the values that they're trying to get across. As a dry cleaner, they believe in, sharing or creating a place for the community to come hang. Who knows what it might be, but creating something like that not only helps for business, but it makes the employees and the people that work there, even as a small business, feel like they're doing something more than just their, hourly wage, but they're contributing more. And so you can figure that out. It could be from the founder's belief. The founder loves hiking, so part of the proceeds go to, helping the environment, or
cleaning up local trails, or
opening trails, or helping the National Park Service, or they give guides to hiking in the area with every purchase. Who knows what it might be? It could be anything, but it has to be something.
Yeah, you're right, because I think employees, not only, we talked about customers demanding it, but I think employees are going to start, because they have choices now, right? It's low unemployment. If you don't like where you are, you can go. And so it's going to come down to employee retention too, which is expensive if you don't have a strategy for making people happy, and so are feeling connected to a reason why they come to work every day.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Let's see if we've got some questions. Nicole asked, as someone who works for a family-owned business and not a sexy business. Let's see if I can pull up her full question. It's kind of hanging up on me. Let's see. All right. I wish that was working for me. We just can't get anything.
This is a day of technical difficulties.
It is.
Nicole works for a family business.
Okay, Nicole. I'm gonna see if we can get to the question in another way. Give me just a second, because I do want to get to your question. Let's see here. I do apologize for the. So her question is, so I work for family-owned business, not sexy. So philanthropy is a really great way to meet community and build the brand, show you care where your business is located, as well as humanize your brand and connect to potential clients. Couldn't agree with more. It was more of a statement. Somebody else talks about the sales people cornering you in stores. BS meter is high. That's true. Anyway, let's see. Okay, she was just saying, she's just agreeing with us, not a question.
Not a question. Okay, thanks, Nicole.
All right, so how does going back to a question I had? For me, the book was the sort of the point of the book. What I got out of it was that that using, or I guess maybe blending, appreciation and collaboration is a great way to ensure success. That was one of my kind of major takeaways. Would you say that that's for you one of your takeaways?
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we start a business or we're getting some form of success, whatever it is, if it's a small business, big business, we tend to get really proud of ourselves. And I think as we realize that over time, that has very little sustained value. And when you try to share the stage with those around you and in the company that you work in, you get a bigger sense of pride and success. But our initial reaction is to become narcissistic and let the ego take over and just want to feel more of that success and make ourselves feel good about ourselves. And then you realize that the collaboration imperative is critical for sustained happiness and growth, is to share in those wins, because behind anything that you ever achieve, unless you're a one-man or one-woman business doing the ideation, the invoicing, the sponsorship, the ideation, most businesses don't work like that. I had my own business where I did all of that for about a year and a half, and I basically had a nervous breakdown trying to do it all and feeding that ego and just trying to put it all on my shoulders. And when I joined and had other partners and then other people in the company, you realize that is the measurement of success. When you can share success in a collaborative way, in a collective way, it's not about one person. It's why our company is called Mechanism, and it's not called Means and Harris or whatever. It's not called the names of the founders. It's about a collective group creating success. And that to me is ultimately much more rewarding.
Much more fun too.
Much more fun, for sure. Exactly.
It is not fun doing it by yourself. That's for sure.
No, it's a real drag. Yeah.
It's hard to celebrate with yourself, right?
It is. We need other people,
What is you? I think you talk about success. These are the 11 habits you think are keys to success.
Yeah.
In the book, and I think that separates the book from other things I've read. I mean, we're in an interesting time, and I think there's a lot of shifts going on. Um, do you think that this book is going to be relevant for forever? I mean, is it? It's kind of a weird question, but I think books, they're ideas and things that we read about and we listen and we hear and that get beat into our heads, um, about ways to do business, the ways to negotiate, the ways to sell. There's so much material out there we get bombarded with. Um, this is different. This is a different way of thinking about things. Do you think it's gonna? I mean, does that make any sense? What I'm asking?
Yeah, I think this book took me 3 years. It happened to launch, I think, in a very particular time of interest because we are in such a age of distrust, and we've never seen partisanship like this before. There was a recent survey that in the 1960s, when interviewed parents, 70% didn't care if their son or daughter married someone in a different political party. And then the same study was done in 2016, and it had jumped to only 5 or 6% didn't care if they married someone in a different political party. That's politics, but that's just showing you how divided our country has been. And with the advent of social media, how we're in our own echo chambers, only agreeing with people with our same point of view. And so we come from this place of distrust, fake news, phishing scams. No one trusts Google or Facebook. Who's listening when you talk to Alexa? And so we come from this place of everyone's got our information and they're selling our data. We only agree with people that we want to agree with. We're sort of in our own little worlds. And so I think this book attempts to break through, show there's common humanity, and show that building character and building trust with the world around you is the really only natural path to success. So while I think it's a timely message that's present now, I think the sales books from the 20s are not relevant anymore. Will this book be relevant in the next 10 years? I would think so. In the next 20 years, will there be another way to approach persuasion and sales? Possibly. But I think the old way in the era that we're living in just won't work anymore.
Is there some danger in brands? Take a look at like Nike, really getting behind Colin Kaepernick. And there are a couple other examples, sort of in the last year to 2 years. Is there a danger for brands doing that?
Well, that the Nike example actually led to an increase in sales. I think the Nike has always stood for that idea of equality in athletics, and it's about the skill and performance. So I think the only danger is if the message looks like it's done to capitalize on an issue and isn't inherent to the brand. Okay. But if it's inherent to the brand, then I think it's super relevant and effective. And I think Nike standing up, especially internally, they had some harassment issues, and they always have the stories about how their product's made.
Right.
So I think counteracting that and sticking with their beliefs of sort of this idea of equality on the playing field, I think it really resonated and it really helped the brand. I think another example on the other side is, that famous Pepsi ad where it had Kylie Jenner with the Pepsi. I don't know if you saw that. And there was, right, all this strife, and there's this sort of like political rally, and she gives a cop a Pepsi, and everyone's happy. That came out of nowhere. That isn't a belief set for that brand. That brand's just trying to capitalize on what's happening in society, and they got trashed, and it shows that if you're trying something that feels inauthentic, you're going to get destroyed. And if you do something like the Nike example that's authentic, those are the two extremes, then it results in increased brand value.
Right. I come from, I remember my mother-in-law telling me one time, she had been in business for a long time in a small town. And she said, you never put a political sign in your window or your yard. And because everybody knows that you run the local antique store or the local gas station, or, and you sort of stay apolitical. And I remember that advice going into business. But I kind of think you're right in the sense that we're almost forced today, right, to, I don't say pick a side, but it feels like we're getting to that point where you're sort of forced to say what you believe and how you and the way you see things.
Yeah, I think it's important to state what you believe in, and I think it's also equally important to listen to other people that have different opinions and understand why. So I was at an event recently with someone that I really respected, and we were talking about immigration. And he was really anti-immigration, and instead of just saying, well, I can't believe you like Trump or you like this policy, I dug and tried to find out why and what was behind it, because the human commonality that we all have, there has to be a reason. Like, people are smart and bright, and just because they have a different value than us doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense. And so,
right,
what it came out from that is that he came from a lower middle class family. A lot of his dad couldn't get jobs a lot of the time. Blaming cheap labor for taking a lot of his jobs. They grew up poorer than he thought they should have. And so a lot of it comes from personal experience, and you just need to dig and understand what's behind it. What is the motivation? And when you look at it from that perspective, it makes sense that he might share those values. That, I grew up upper middle class. My parents were professors and teachers. I didn't have that experience, so that doesn't resonate with me, but I can understand the other side.
Right. It puts you in his shoes for a second.
Yeah, it's about empathy.
Yeah, and something we're sorely lacking these days, it seems.
Definitely.
This has been great. The last question I always ask people is, what's the best advice you ever got, and who gave it to you?
Oh man, that is.
Or it could be something recent. It maybe that really sticks out.
Well, I don't know if this is I don't know. This isn't necessarily this is a lesson I learned. It's not necessarily what someone told me, but the best advice that I try to always follow, because I've been burned in business before, is never sell anything you wouldn't buy yourself.
I like that.
And if you're trying to sell something that in your gut you're like, I would never buy this, or I don't know who would buy this, but I'm going to have to sell it, or I want to sell it because I'm going to make it's an add-on, or I'm making margin, or I'm selling this other product. That is a quick way to lose a lot of trust in relationships. So I always keep that mantra in mind: never sell anything you wouldn't buy yourself.
And lose yourself too, probably.
Exactly.
Well, that's sage and smart, and makes a lot of sense to me. And Jason, thanks for being on the program today. I know you've got a busy week ahead, so I do appreciate it. And this is, I was going to get ready. Now, I will say the book is The Soulful Art of Persuasion. It's Gary V recommended. He gave you a plug the other day, which was...
Yeah, I did. Appreciated that.
How'd you swing that, by the way?
Well, I've kind of known him, and I asked him, I sent him a book. He's like, oh yeah, I like the topic. So he played it.
Never be afraid to ask, right? That's one thing I've learned.
That's one thing that I always learn early on, is when you reach out to your role models or people you respect, you think they're never going to hit you back because they're getting inundated with people reaching out, but everyone thinks that, so they don't reach out. So if someone you want to get in touch with, reach out to them, and a lot of times they'll get right back to you.
And if not, just continue liking and sharing and commenting on their stuff, and you never know.
You never know.
Yeah, get in front of them.
Exactly.
And don't be afraid to ask. I love that. The book is The Soulful Art of Persuasion. I think we'll post a link in the stories and in these videos, in this video when they after we finish, and so that you can get directly to the Amazon page to buy it, or your favorite online bookstore. And it's in stores now, right?
Yeah, it's everywhere books are sold. It's on barnesandnoble.com, also on amazon.com.
Great.
So yeah, everywhere.
And well, anyway, thank you for spending your afternoon or your morning or wherever you are. But thanks for spending an hour or so with us today. It's been our pleasure. I hope you learned something. I know I did. And if you like the show, give it a like or share. And if you do have questions, you can still ask them. We'll still engage with you on social media. And I know Jason and I will answer questions that are posted via LinkedIn or any of the other platforms. So don't hesitate to post your questions. You can find out the current schedule for the week and the coming weeks on powerlunch.live. That's our website, powerlunch.live. So check out the site for the upcoming schedule. We do the show every Monday through Friday around 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. So thank you for joining us. And Jason, again, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.